this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Cover 3 College Football Podcast, and this is Summer School. Today, we are talking some Oklahoma football. Of course, I'm going to go to Sooners Illustrated. What's going on? It's Josh Callaway. Awesome for us last year. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. This is one of the benchmarks of the summer, kind of the off season. Doing this with you, it kind of makes it feel like we're getting somewhere. Football's getting a little bit closer. So glad to be on with you again.
No doubt about it. So some ups and downs for Oklahoma last year.
Sure.
Obviously, I think probably, given that it's Oklahoma, fans are going to focus on the downs. The win against Alabama was nice, but ultimately the season not to expectation. But let me ask you this: if they had not gotten so banged up at receiver and maybe the O-line stays a little healthier, do you think they had something last year? Like, do you think they were on the right track pre-injury based on what you had seen in fall camp?
I don't know. The offense was such a mess. It was kind of a Murphy's Law on offense because the injuries did not help. Don't get me wrong. The wide receiver room was decimated, like you said. Offensive line got healthy-ish toward the end of the year, but in fall camp, the first half, it was just they were on their third string center. Like it was tough to start the year. But the offense was just, as Brent Venables put himself, so using his word, an abomination on offense last year. And so Jackson Arnold didn't play well, turned the ball over a ton. They obviously had to let Seth Luttrell go mid-season. So, I don't know. I mean, you'd like to think it would have been better if they would have been a lot healthier. And it certainly, that would have helped, obviously. But there were so many problems with the offense last year that it's almost hard to even circle any one thing. It was just kind of bad everywhere. They couldn't run the ball. Quarterback play was bad. Injuries. Like it was kind of just a total mess. And so that's been the goal of the offseason is to fix it. They've made a new OC, new quarterback, bunch of portal additions. They've thrown everything at trying to fix the offense. So we'll see. The defense was great. We knew the defense was going to be good, and it was. But offensively, it was just miles and miles from where they needed to be competitive and obviously win a lot of games in the SEC.
So Sawyer Robertson and the Baylor OC end up staying there.
Sure.
And so Oklahoma turns to Washington State. They get John Mateer and they get Ben Arbuckle, which is, nice to have an OC and quarterback who know each other.
No doubt.
Obviously, he's the guy. What have you heard? What have you seen so far from that duo? And what are you expecting this offense to look like?
Yeah, so far A+ for John Mateer in particular. Ben Arbuckle too, but John Mateer in particular, he's got the fan base fired up. He's kind of the beacon of hope right now as far as the offense goes. He's done everything he could do without doing it in games, right, which he hasn't had the chance to do just yet. As soon as he got to campus, he started showing up at basketball games and stuff like that, and he's got the fan base fired up. And the way that the other guys on the team talked about him in spring, obviously we got to get to practice a little bit as well, but the way that his teammates talk about him, it's noticeable. It's not stuff you heard last year about Jackson, frankly, and the way he's kind of commanding the room and the fact that he knows Arbuckle's offense, he's helping teach it is definitely helpful. Kind of reminds me of when Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Lebby came aboard. It was the same kind of thing. DG was able to really help be kind of an extra coach and stall the offense. That's what John Mateer is certainly able to do right now. Him and Ben Arbuckle, they've got a good relationship. They kind of have each other's back a little bit. You can kind of sense that talking to them. So, excitement's high. I think so far so good. But again, it's not going to matter if they do it in games. But through the spring and, to this point, as we get into, the middle of May, this is it. John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle have checked every box to at least give fans hope and, some optimism and excitement that it's going to be a lot better, this time around. And the offense, which was, obviously so rough last year, it'll, turn a massive corner this time around.
What are the reasons for optimism on the offensive line?
Yeah, the offensive line, they hit it hard in the portal. First off, health is going to be the obvious. You mentioned that earlier. The offensive line was okay, and the back end of the year wasn't a massive issue at the end of the year when they got some guys healthy. Logan Howland and Heath Ozida were a couple guys on the left side who at tackle and guard were able to kind of really do some nice things down the stretch of the season. Troy Everett, the starting center, was banged up tremendously at the first part of the year. He's been healthy throughout spring. He's a huge part of this thing. He's really kind of taken on a pretty big leadership role really on the whole roster, but especially in the O-line. They signed a couple of 5-stars. Michael Fasusi's got everyone very fired up. Freshman offensive tackle. Seemed like it was asking a lot for him to be like a day one starter as a freshman, but through camp, that's certainly possible. He had a great spring and just one of those guys that looks different. And they hit the portal hard. I mean, they added Derek Simmons, who I think's got a good chance to be the starting right tackle. They added Jake Michla and from Stanford in the post-spring portal that at the very least will be the backup center and maybe could vie for legitimate snaps. So, they hit the portal hard. You get some guys healthy, some freshmen that are exciting, and some year two guys that are exciting, from a year ago. Eddie Pierre-Louise, the guy was a freshman last year, got tons of size. I think is ready to make a big jump. Maybe could be a starting guard for them this upcoming year. Daniel Akinkunmi is another one that was a true freshman last year that so far they really like the improvement he's made. So I think it's fair to be optimistic. The offensive line will be a lot better. You're still relying on some unproven guys potentially and guys that are making a jump from a lower level up to the SEC. So you never know how that's going to transfer. But if they can stay healthy, they should be much, much better along the offensive line. That feels pretty safe to say.
Receiver was a massive problem last year,
Mm-hmm.
in large part due to health. What are we looking like there?
Yeah, the receiver room was just a graveyard last year. Everyone was hurt the whole year. Top 5 guys missed the vast majority of the season, if not the whole season. In some cases, Nick Anderson was out the whole year. Jaden Gibson was out the whole year. Jalil Farouk was out basically the whole year. Angelo Anthony was out the whole year. And Deion Burks played, I don't know how many games it ended up being. A few, right? He was out a lot of the year. So they hit that position really hard. All those guys are gone pretty much with the exception of Deion Burks. Jaden Gibson is still around too, but he had a very serious knee injury that he's still recovering from. It's not really clear, where he'll be whenever we get to the fall. They went hard in the portal. Like I said, Deion Burks is back. First off, they ponied up to keep him. They put the money together, NIL package to make it happen, to keep Burks around for another year. He maybe could have went to the portal. He maybe had NFL as a possibility for him. He's running it back another year. That was a big win of the offseason to get him back. And then they went hard in the portal. Like I said, Giovanni Gibson's a big one. He had an injury, broke his leg in camp, but they do think he'll be back this season. He had a great camp. They just added Jermichael Carter from McNeese. He's one that adds a lot of size to that room. They really needed to. Isaiah Satania comes from Arkansas. He's a burner, a lot of speed. They really like him as the very least, kind of that number 2 slot behind Burks. He might kick outside. They also signed a couple freshmen they really like. Elijah Thomas is an in-state guy who's got great size, had an awesome camp. They think he could be an immediate impact. Manny Choice, another one's a freshman. He's a big body guy. And they added some other portal guys as well. Keontez Lewis from Southern Illinois. He was kind of banged up in camp and spring, so didn't get to see a lot of him, but he's one that they think could factor in. Josiah Martin from Cal. So they added a ton. It's like a totally different room with the exception of Deion Burks. After what happened last year, they basically went for, we need proven production, even if it's at a lower level. We need proven production. All these guys had big years statistically at their old place for the most part, and they're just hoping they can stay a lot healthier because it was just an absolute mess at that position last year due to injury. They were relying on a bunch of young guys, a bunch of freshmen, and just it went about as you'd expect, one of the many problems with the offense last year. So that position, kind of like offensive line, if it can stay healthy, it should be a lot better. But after last year, I think every OU fan is kind of just holding their breath, hoping that everyone will stay on the field, frankly.
Are their tempo down this year, right? Like Wazoo was not quite as fast as I think what Oklahoma wanted to. But I guess maybe not, because Oklahoma, they couldn't go quite as fast as they probably wanted to because of all the injuries and the young quarterbacks, right? Like, if you think they're faster than they, I don't know, like in my notes, I think they're slower than they intended to be, but they may not be slower than they actually operated at.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that more. They didn't have a spring game, so we didn't get to see the in a game setting, if you will. I don't think it'll be like, the Levy offense is a pass where just, get the signal in and go as fast as you possibly could. I do think they'll run some tempo though. And, I'm curious to see the Arbuckle offense, a little bit. He's a young guy. He hasn't coached a lot of football. Obviously Washington State, what they did last year with John Mateer should help. Like we kind of talked about earlier, the fact that Mateer knows it should help, kind of get up and running and can move things along a little quicker and be able to handle something like that. But that's something that's kind of unknown, really, kind of what it'll actually look like. And, honestly, kind of pass run split. Those are all kind of things that are, a little bit unknown, frankly, with where the offense is. But, we'll see. I think it's, something that's kind of still to be determined a little bit, frankly, as we get into fall and once the bolts start flying and the games start.
Is there a guy who we have not mentioned yet who, if on the one side he finally lives up to his potential, or on the flip side, maybe it's a guy who arrives and meets his ceiling a year earlier than we all expect him to, that would really change the fortunes of this offense?
That's a good question. They went and they added Jaden Ott in the portal at running back. He's one that everyone's very fired up about. One of the more coveted running backs in the portal. That running back room wasn't in bad shape, really. But Jim Nagy, who's the new general manager that has everyone very excited as well, he identified Jaden Ott as just one of those guys that even though it wasn't necessarily a position of need, it was just a guy that was too good to pass up sort of a situation. And so they made it happen to get Ott in. And it's just kind of that combination with him and Mateer, that's two of the more coveted portal guys at their respective positions, in the winter or spring. You pair it with that running back room, Xavier Robinson was a true freshman last year who really came on at the end of the year. He was awesome in that Alabama upset. That combination, Javonte Barnes is also back. It kind of feels like that running back room is kind of sneaky in a really good place, especially with the addition of Ott. So, if the offensive line is better, it kind of feels like Ott, Robinson, Barnes, Taylor Tatum's still around too. He's a former 5-star. He's going to year 2. Like that running back room could be really good. They might be able to run the ball very well, as well as they have, in the Brent Venables era. So that's kind of the sneaky part. I think everyone kind of comes in with Ben Arbuckle and it's like an air raid kind of, tag on him, and John Mateers, everybody's excited, but the run game and kind of Jaden Ott is kind of the one that really feels like he can take the offense to, another level. Offensively, but we'll see how it shakes out. But that's a big one for sure. Is Jaden Ott in that running game.
All right, let's hit a break here. On the flip side, we'll talk a little Sooners defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, y'all, welcome back into the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast, Summer School Edition. We are talking Oklahoma Sooners. It's time to talk Brent Venables' baby. That's the Oklahoma defense, which was quite good last year, despite the fact the offense gave them very little to work with. As a Florida State guy who went there in the early 2000s, that reminded me a lot of what we saw there with the defense still holding up its end of the bargain and the offense just vomiting all over itself. So, we probably don't need to spend quite as much time on the defensive side of the ball. They did lose some key leaders and some really good, I don't know how good they're going to be in the NFL, but some really damn good college players at the very least. Who are you most confident they can replace out of the guys who departed?
Yeah, like you said, this defense should be really good again, but they are losing some big names, guys that have been around for a long time, played a lot of football at OU. In particular, the trio of Danny Stutzman at linebacker, Billy Bowman at safety, then Ethan Downs at defensive end. Those guys, 4-year players, basically, played a lot of football for all 4 of their years, 4-year starters in some cases there. So big names and guys who are leaders certainly on this defense will have to replace. If I had to say one that I feel pretty confident they will replace, it would probably actually be Stutzman, even though I would argue Danny Stutzman has been the best player on OU's team, the last couple of years. That linebacker room's in great shape. Kip Lewis, a guy who had a great season last year, he has stepped right in as kind of the face of the defense, really. They're expecting really big things. Cody McKenzie's another one in that linebacker room. Those two guys, that's kind of the duo. And Brent Venables, you talk about his baby defense. The baby within the baby is the linebacker room. That's his position. And they're in great shape there. They added Kendall Daniels from Oklahoma State as well, who's just kind of a freak in nature guy. He's perfect for the cheetah position in Brent Venables' defense. So, the linebacker room is in good shape with those, especially those two guys that I mentioned at the top, Kip Lewis and Cody McKenzie. That's kind of the duo. They're both their play on the field as well as their leadership off it. Because that's the thing. Danny Stutzman was the leader of the team and kind of the rallying voice. And but I think they're doing a pretty good job kind of filling in those shoes, those large shoes left by Danny. And those are the guys that are stepping up in that spot that I think is going to be playing a lot of snaps and doing a lot of really good things for Oklahoma, coming up this fall.
So is there a guy or two on this defense who you think have real breakout potential?
Yeah, there's a few. David Stone's a big one. Former 5-star defensive tackle. Played a little bit last year, was just kind of a rotational player as a true freshman. He looks awesome. Just a Mack truck guy. You're talking about building inside out in the SEC. This is one of the guys that needs to blossom. And he actually entered the portal really briefly post-spring, but they got him back out of the portal. One of the sneaky wins of the offseason, retaining David. He's a guy ready to make a next step. And that defensive tackle room is probably the strength of the team. Jay Jackson was a freshman All-America last year. They got Dominic Williams back. Grayson Halton played well last year. He's back as well. But David Stone's just one of those guys who can really elevate going to year 2. And another one, PJ Adebawore is another one on the defensive end. it's been a weird run for him. Another guy who's a former 5-star, just an alien. I mean, so long, arms hanging down to his knees, like just a massive individual that hasn't played a lot. And, a lot of fans are kind of getting a little, I don't know, anxious of like, this guy was a 5-star. When are we going to see it? He's going into year 3. He certainly looks the part. He's got to do it in games, but that's another one that could really elevate that edge, that edge rusher room to a different level. Because they like what they got there too. Our Mason Thomas is back. They added Marvin Jones from Florida State. They like that room, but again, when you have those 5-star talents, you don't just stumble into that. You want to see him live up to it. So those are 2 huge ones on the defensive line. The defensive line, which is in good shape, it's got really good depth. Going to be one of the best defensive lines Oklahoma's had. Certainly probably since Brent Venables was here the first time. It's been a while since they've had a group like this. And those are 2 guys, though, that could elevate it really to that next truly elite tier if those guys live up to their potential. And there's a lot of excitement that they will.
This might sound overly simplistic, but
Sure.
given the amount of proven production that Oklahoma brought in at pretty much like every position, how much is this really just, look, what's the real level of Mateer, right? I mean, if you look at his game log, I mean, he destroyed like a historically bad level of Mountain West, other than, Boise, which was obviously, very good with Ginty. And then, 47%, 1-1 touchdown interception against Texas Tech, 50% passer, 1-1 against Washington, like a big time sack numbers in a couple of the tougher games. Like, now the thing is, I think the counter to that is naturally, well, like, he made some really awesome plays. It's not his fault that the rest of the Mountain West sucks. And like, he also has Mountain West players around him, So, like, I mean, if he plays at like a top half quarterback level in the SEC, his team should be in really good shape, right? If they stay healthy.
Yeah, no, that's the hope, right? I mean, Oklahoma's not looking for an elite offense. They're not. They're looking for an offense to not be a mess, right? I mean, they just need a serviceable offense. That's at least the mindset. Maybe that's not true, but that's the approach. I mean, Brent Venables pointed out, he's pointed out a couple of times, because it's one of those kind of bending stats to fit you, but he pointed out a couple of times, 3 teams were top 50 in efficiency, defense, and special teams last year. Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma. Ohio State and Notre Dame played for a national title. Oklahoma was bad. And then the difference is obviously that Oklahoma's offense was horrendous, right? It was terrible. So they're coming into this season thinking if Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer can just make this offense serviceable, don't turn the ball over. They turned the ball over at just an ungodly rate last year. Didn't give them a chance to win, frankly, at least a few times. I mean, you think of a couple games, Tennessee, South Carolina, certainly, Missouri, really, even too, the way that game ended. The defense and the team had no chance to win because of what the offense was doing, especially in regards to turning the football over. So they're just looking for a serviceable offense to go with the defense. Special teams has been pretty solid, that they'll be okay. They'll be in a lot of games, have a chance to win a lot of games. That's the mindset. That's the approach, and it's funny because a lot of parallels have been drawn around here to 2014 and 2015 for Oklahoma, where 2014, people may not remember, Oklahoma had a high preseason ranking, expected to be a pretty good team, and the offense was bad, and they stunk with Trevor Knight. And Bob Stoops had to make what he called the toughest decision of his career. He fired Josh Heupel after that season, a guy who won a national title for them as a quarterback, as a player. And that offseason, they hired Lincoln Riley, right? That worked out great. And they gave the keys to Baker Mayfield. And, those 2 guys kind of turned OU football around, really. I'm not saying Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer are going to be Lincoln Riley and Baker Mayfield, but that's kind of the formula. Again, like, it's very similar, eerily similar, in that Brent Venables had Seth Luttrell. There was a lot of expectation with Jackson Arnold. It didn't work. And Brent Venables had to make the hard decision to fire Seth Luttrell, who was also on that national championship winning team. And now he goes and hires, the young up-and-coming West Texas OC. They bring in Mateer, who's got some Baker Mayfield traits to him. And they're kind of hoping for a repeat, frankly. But you don't need it to be – you don't need John Mateer to win a Heisman like Baker did and go number 1. You just need the offense to be, serviceable, to go with the defense that should be really good again. And then you kind of go from there. You'll have a chance to win a lot of games that way. That's at least the mindset, certainly in the approach that Oklahoma has taken this offseason for sure.
Awesome, man. Really, really enjoy this. I'll get you out of here on this.
Yeah.
How do you define success for Oklahoma in 25?
This is one of the more heavily debated conversations of the offseason because, look, Brent Venables knows, everyone knows that this is a huge year for him. Like, Oklahoma has to be better. They can't go 6-7 again, we'll say, and Brent can expect to be back, frankly, in 2026. And he knows that. Everyone kind of knows that. So it's a huge offseason. Oklahoma's been very aggressive in trying to turn this around. They were in, obviously, they hired Jim Nagy. They got the most coveted quarterback in the portal, John Mateer. They went and got Jaden Ott. They were in on Jim Knowles to be their defensive coordinator. Didn't get him, but they tried. Like, they've been very aggressive this offseason to turn around and to kind of show to the fan base that, like, what has been happening is not acceptable, right, at Oklahoma. Like, they've thrown money around, for lack of a better term, to try and fix this thing. So, there's been a lot of conversation. What is enough? What's the win number, for it to be acceptable? It's hard. It's hard to know because it really feels like it's going to be more of like a product on the field thing. Are they competitive? Now, they can't go 6-7 again. I think 8 or 9 wins is a reasonable expectation and is probably what they need to do to feel good about it with what they've done this offseason. I think that's fair. The funny thing is that we're going to know pretty quick, I think. Week 2, Oklahoma hosts Michigan in Norman. That's a game right early part of the year that if Oklahoma loses at home to maybe Bryce Underwood, maybe first road star for him, that's a smash the panic button in the second week of September. I think that's going to happen, and that's going to be fair if that's the way it goes. So yeah, I think everyone's expecting 8-9 wins, maybe hover around the fringe of the playoff conversation, depending on how things go. Certainly got to be more competitive though. You can't be losing to Texas by 30 points, stuff like that is going to matter. If you go 8-4, but you get blown out 3 times, that could feel worse than maybe even, a 7-5 where you were competitive the whole year. It kind of depends on the nuance of it. So, but yeah, Oklahoma's expected to be a lot better. The expectations around here never really go down. Even after 6-7, expectations are still high, and the fan base certainly expects to be competing in the top end of the SEC and to be in that playoff conversation every single year. That's where the bar is here. So it's a big year for Brent. He knows that, and this whole staff, really, it's a big year, and they all are aware of that as they try to turn this thing around.
Josh, really appreciate the time, man. I feel like I've learned a ton on the Sooners. We'll be following all your work all year, and man, enjoyed it.
I appreciate it, sir. Thanks for having me.